Welcome to another Sober on a Drunk Planet podcast. And I am very honoured to be joined by one of our ambassadors of the Sober on a Drunk Planet group on Facebook. That's Oliver, and also known on Instagram as the Sober Chef. How are you doing, Oliver?
I'm very well, thanks, Sean. Very well. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. Apart from, though we mentioned it before we went on air, but I suffer from seasonal mood disorder, and now it's like -4 degrees at night. My whole body is just telling me to be depressed. So
Yeah,
I'm sort of
that's
fighting
topical.
that and trying to get to the gym and sort of maintain some sort of mental health at the moment. But otherwise, lots to be grateful for, and really looking forward to our chat today because we've known each other for a couple of years
Yeah, I reckon
since.
yeah, I reckon about two and a bit. I think if memory serves, I think I commented on something on Instagram and you replied back to me. And I can't remember what it was. You said, "Oh, I like that." And you said, "I'll join the Facebook group." And I thought, I'm a member of a few Facebook groups now. I thought I'll join it. And now it's the only one I'm a part of. So yeah, I reckon 2 years. I reckon.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and to be honest, you've been a great help for my own sobriety because there aren't that many people that I go to. I'm not part of AA anymore, so I haven't got that regular meetup. But when things have been a bit tough, we've messaged each other. And that's a great thing about the Facebook group as well. You get to know people, and yeah, you've been a great help for me. So before we get into your story, thank you very much for that. Things like that I'm really appreciative of. And you're 18 years sober now.
18 years sober, yeah.
Wow. So we got a lot to we got a lot to go through then.
A lot to, yeah.
So yeah, I'll just hand over to you. So we'll just go over, just talk about your story. We're going to run for about 30 minutes, bring it up to modern day, and then always like to sort of talk about things you might have been struggling with in the current time, because sobriety is not like a one and done thing. You go through the waves of life like everyone else. So just to give people some hope, and then yeah, hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Yeah, I might need you to start the questioning. I might need you to signpost. I might need you to signpost initially, because otherwise I'm going to be. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably take it back to the early '80s or something. I might need a starting point.
Where
You know,
where where are you from originally?
I'm from Edinburgh. I was born and raised in Edinburgh up until I was 10, and then we moved up to the Highlands, to a place called Kinlochrannoch, which is pretty remote. And I stayed there till I was 16, and I moved back to Edinburgh. I went to London when I was 18 and a half maybe. And I've been in and around Bristol and North Somerset since 1999.
Oh wow, lovely part of the world as well.
Mm.
So in all that time, when did the drinking start? And was it a case of once the drinking started, that pretty much set the tone for how your drinking patterns were?
Yeah, absolutely. So I couldn't get served. I didn't start drinking until I was 18, maybe even 19. I started drinking in Kent, which would have been, yeah, I'd have been about, yeah, 20. Because I couldn't get served. I'm a diminutive guy. I looked really young as well. And getting asked for ID was just really embarrassing. And I had got drunk when I was about 14, 15 on some whiskey, and I'd had a horrendous incident. I think I tried to strangle my best friend with a telephone cord. I put my arm through a window. I had to get stitches on my wrist. I'd really stressed my mother out. An ambulance came. And I was like, right, you're all right. But I did do drugs. I got into drugs really, really, really quickly. I was actively seeking drugs from about the age of 15 onwards, which was in the 90s. It's quite easy to get. It's very easy to get drugs now, isn't it? Especially sort of weed and pills. But back in the 90s, it was dodgy as hell trying to get drugs. But it was better than it was easier for me than the embarrassment of getting asked for ID and not having it, especially if I was with a girl. So but yeah, I had things. I was my father had died when he was very young. I was 13. I was sexually abused through the church, so I was carrying a lot of trauma and shit. So once I started drinking when I was sort of 18, 19, I was on. you know, I was on, and I can remember very, very clearly transitioning from drugs to alcohol. Yeah, I probably I got sober in 2005, and I reckon from about 98 to about 2005, I'd be surprised if I did any kind of drugs more than half a dozen times. You know, and drugs have been a daily thing for me. I was just waiting to find my thing, and I found it with alcohol. It's as simple as that. Um, and I'd also remember very, very clearly one day looking at alcohol, thinking, you know, this, you know, that, well, this is Ribena, but, you know, thinking this, this works, you know, this is the magic. It really is. You know, I can also remember that very clearly. And yeah, I mean, being honest with you, Sean, I reckon I was probably an alcoholic at the age of 20. I reckon it was already in me, you know. And by the time I was 21, it was, yeah, drinking was an enormous part of my daily routine.
Would you say at that young age, with the sexual abuse, were you consciously masking it, or were you subconsciously masking it at that stage?
Yeah, I was subconsciously masking it. I mean, it had really knocked me. I had no confidence. Obviously, I didn't trust people. So going out, getting a few drinks inside me, that connection that you have with young people, and I was funny, they were funny. I could talk to girls. It definitely hid how I was feeling. It definitely the whole yeah, the whole package was definitely a subconscious mask of how I felt. I think it wasn't until I got sober a couple of years later and other bits and bobs I realized the gravitas, the impact that it had on me. But yeah, I suppose like a lot of people who get into it really heavy, really quickly, as many of us do, yeah, you're too young, really, aren't you, within yourself to articulate. It's like, thank God this is changing how I feel, you
Yeah,
know. And I always say, I think that's what happens. I think most people get hooked on the way that alcohol makes them feel or changes the way they feel quite a period of time before they get hooked on the alcohol, you know. And that's initially what pulls you in. It changes your perspective, it changes your feelings. That's its allure, you know. And you can waste a lot of time, I think, trying to look back and it's like, oh, where did it all go wrong? When did I get hooked? When did I get addicted? You know, the starting point is the fact that you keep visiting alcohol because it's enhancing your life, it's heightening your life, or it's suppressing something. That's the starting point. And you're probably not addicted physically at that time, but psychologically, it's doing its job as a drug.
yeah. And then what did your drinking career, probably the wrong term, look like then between that period up to 2005?
It was quite rapid, really. I was drinking. I was drinking in the mornings. I would drink full on. I would drink as much as I possibly could. Um, I was really ambitious. I worked for a very good restaurant group. They had 6 or 7 restaurants in the UK, and they kept it quite small, so they could really maintain quality. Everybody kind of knew each other. I got to a certain point where I was um, sort of known within the company, and you know there was a star next to my name. I was one for the future. I was able to get enough money together to buy my first property. I had a sensible girlfriend, a really nice, a really good woman. She got the worst example of me. Um, and I hate the word functioning alcoholic, but I suppose that's what you would categorize me as. Um, but yeah, my life was very neatly contained into massively overambitious work, really quite ruthless as well, which is certainly that time in kitchens was advocated, and then really bought into the drinking culture of chefing. But I mean, I didn't know many guys that drank like me, if I'm honest with you, you know. And I never missed an opportunity to tip booze down my neck. I didn't drink spirits. It didn't agree with me. I didn't drink wine. I didn't like it. I was a lager drinker and I was a cider drinker. But I drank massive amounts of it, and the fear of not being able to get access to alcohol was palpable. Do you know what I mean? If I thought I was going to struggle to get my hands on drink, I'd be getting stressed. really stressed, you know. And it's a full-time job, isn't it? I knew all the late night bars. I knew all the places you could perhaps go to afterwards and what level of dodginess they sat on. Do you know what I mean? It's like you could go and get a drink there, but like, were you likely to see some pretty horrific violence? Yes. You know, were you and all of these things, and just constantly to go to the toilet, don't you? Like, I knew where every last public toilet in Bristol was with like geographic accuracy, you know, and how quickly I could get there. But I think I've said it before in the group quite a few times. There was things I just really didn't know. Like I was a liar, I was a thief, and I was a cheat. And I genuinely didn't know that. And those were three enormous characteristics that I had that were just, looking back now and knowing, they were just so visibly on display. And I didn't even know it, which is probably why I was in so much conflict with people. You know, loads of people. Work's often where you meet people that you perhaps wouldn't usually choose to socialize with or be around. And you know, I've worked with loads of people. Did I like them? No. Did I trust them? Yes. Well, that's really not a bad starting point. You know, if you trust someone, you trust what they say, you trust what they're doing, their political, economical, and social beliefs are neither here nor there. But I was just such an insanely dishonest human being and a thief, especially of alcohol. Yeah, nobody trusted me, so I had no interpersonal relationships. I was constantly in conflict, which obviously gave me really shit feelings. So I drank more. Just a never-ending cycle. And I reckon from about 2004 till I stopped drinking in October 2005, I would drink from the moment I got up. It's as simple as that. You know, I'd wake up and start drinking. That was my whack.
And do you think being in the industry that you were in, were you able to drink on the job, or was that quite separate?
Yeah, no, you could drink after work. Sorry, you could drink after work. Give me a sec because he won't stop.
Because that's the show is Stanley, isn't it?
It is Stanley. Do you want to see him?
Yeah.
Come here. Right. Here he is. Oh, 20 kilos of him. There he
I've
is.
seen him on the group growing up. God, he's got big, hasn't he?
He's a massive chap now. A massive chap. I didn't do my research. We've had lots of Jack Russells, which I thought were, but French Bulldogs, they're crackers. I'm going to let him out so we can.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, chefing. I think chefing can be quite dysfunctional, but there's still. It's an old Clive Woodward quote from rugby, the game within the game. There were still rules within chefing and conduct. And generally, yeah, being off your head in a kitchen, not cool, not really accepted. Not to say that guys weren't, but if you worked at quite a good level, which I did, yeah, it was frowned upon. You know, it was frowned upon, which is nuts when you consider that I came up like in like the Gordon Ramsay era. I mean, guys just getting sheets ripped off them. I mean, nothing. I mean, I've never been hit in a kitchen, but I've been grabbed, screamed at, and all of it. But yeah, it's quite. There was rules, you know, conduct. Yeah, waving knives about, stuff like that. Not on. You know, you couldn't hurt people. But you know as well as I do, I think there is some industries that have got massive drinking cultures. And there's people that aren't alcoholics within them. I think perhaps ended up in that. But yeah, I'm not going to say that I was always sober on the job because I wasn't. But yeah, generally, yeah, being off your head in kitchens because it's a medium risk environment. If something goes wrong, someone's going to get hurt and probably quite significantly hurt as well. And there's a real respect of that in kitchens. Well, if you're off your head, you're a liability. Do you know what I mean? And teams just won't put up with you.
So when the drinking then progresses, as it does with everyone and with age, we find it inevitably harder. How did that then manifest itself in like your quality of work? Were you finding work harder?
Yeah. So that restaurant group that I was a part of, I left that job I think in 2003. And until I stopped drinking, I just had a whole load of bidding jobs where I was allowed to be a dysfunctional alcoholic. I mean, one kitchen I worked in, it was a big kitchen in central Bristol. I mean, I think I was one of like 5 guys that were just like openly alcoholic, you know. And I know a lot of people, their story is one of denial. Mine's not. Sean, my story is one of until I stopped, an absolute unwillingness to confront what I was and where I was heading, you know. And for some people, it is denial, isn't it? And I'm not judging. Some people have that story. Some people literally realize, oh, God, I've got a drinking problem. Wow. And like between that moment of realization and them stopping is like a number of weeks, or them reaching out to help is a number of weeks. Yeah. That wasn't mine. My quality of life deteriorated, my health deteriorated, which is ultimately why I stopped drinking in the first instance. I had no relationships. My work was terrible. There wasn't a single aspect of my life that wasn't a towering inferno, you know. And I would still wake up at whatever time in the morning and start drinking. I used to have a can in the shower. That was how I got rid of my hangover, you know, so for the last sort of 16, 17 months.
It's crazy, isn't it? Looking back like that, that's it is crazy looking back, thinking that's crazy. But at the time, it just feels so normal.
Mm.
That's what people, when you try and explain what addiction sort of feels like, it doesn't matter whether you're doing having a can in the shower or I'm doing a line of coke in the loo before I go off to work. It just feels normal. And in your head, that's the normality of the world, and you're sort of walking through mud every day, just trying to get through. So what was it then that was the final push point for you to get sober? What started it?
I ended up in hospital, so I had a massive fit in a kitchen, and I'd actually got a job in quite a good kitchen. I mean, I couldn't do it, and I just remember I was like, God, is it getting dark? And then I came to hyperventilating on gas, and I'd actually been incredibly lucky. I'd done my shouldering, so I got trapped between a fridge door and the kitchen floor, and I've been bouncing up and down as I've been fitting. So I'd done my shoulder. But the truth is, Sean, I mean, there's so many things in the kitchen. I could have fallen on a knife, I could have fallen in a fryer, I could have pulled something on myself. Incredibly lucky. But anyway, I just prepped this massive halibut. This thing was huge. Halibuts are massive. Do you know what I mean? It's literally, if a shark eats one a day, it's like, I'm done, thanks. They're enormous things. So I was in the hospital stinking of fish. And I had to beg this this nurse to let me have a shower, and but I was kept in. I was kept in for 2 weeks. I think just shy of 2 weeks, because my kidneys had basically gone into shutdown. And within that time frame, sure, nobody came to visit me. You know, nobody, not one visitor. I got family in Bristol and everything. And I don't say that with an ounce of self-pity. I didn't have to do a great deal of deep diving. I perhaps didn't know the depth of it totally, but I didn't have to go too deep into myself to kind of understand maybe why that was.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Which was a bit humbling, but also it definitely signposted to something. And then this is me all over. So I was allowed to leave, given various antibiotics and all the rest of it. And I said to this nurse, how can I get home? Now I live within walking distance. And she was like, what? It says here you live in Bedminster. Anyhow, I was just able, through my forceful personality at that time, to get some money out of her to get the bus. It wasn't for a bus, Sean. It wasn't for a bus. I mean, I did go to the bus stop, went to the pub outside the bus stop that I knew would be open at that hour in the morning, and I could pretend that I was a happy traveller and having a pint, you know. But the truth is, from that point onwards, every time I drank after that, it was like the world was just caving in. You know, alcohol, it had stopped working. It just brought on anxiety. My heart palpitations started going. And I thought, I'm gonna die here. You know, I'm gonna absolutely die here. And I ended up in hospital one more time. I was kept in hospital for observation, and I was stuck in this ward. The guy next to me had plastic bags, stuffed full of plastic bags, that was like a teddy bear for him. And he was very concerned about something coming through the wall. The woman next to me was handcuffed to her bed and she spat at everybody that was walking past. And I was sitting there showing like that. Okay, look at the state of this lot. Okay, look at the state of this lot. And it's not until years later as you look back and it was like, they put me in there for a reason. Do you know what I mean? I was with my people,
Yeah.
I wasn't, yeah. It wasn't like COVID, but there's not enough beds. It was like, that was at that time, that's where I belonged. And so I can't remember exactly, but I do remember it was really hot. So let's just say it was like May onwards, and I stopped drinking in October. From May till October, I was genuinely trying to stop drinking. That's what did the job. It took I suppose it took 6 or 7 months for it to stick. I think I had 16 days here, and I genuinely was, probably for the first time ever, it was like, I need to stop. I need to stop. And I realized that I couldn't do it. I went to go and see my GP, and I told her I sat in that doctor's surgery, and I said to her, no, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic, and I know I am. I need to stop. And I think one of the big differences that I see now between, it's a very different world back then. Wasn't it 2005? I think I had a phone, but I think you could phone and text on it. That was it. Might have had a Nokia 3210 or something. Certainly wasn't. And so actually sobriety was quite narrow, really, really quite narrow. I didn't want to go to AA because obviously I'd heard about the God thing, which of course isn't religious. Well, not in Britain, it's not. But I got an assessment meeting. I got an assessment meeting really quickly. I mean, you'll wait 1.5 years now for that assessment meeting. You go and see your GP and you're like, I've got a problem with alcohol. They'll refer you. You're waiting. You are waiting. Well, I got seen really quickly. I reckon I got seen within 10 days. I was sat in front of an alcohol and drugs counsellor, and you wouldn't get that now. It just takes too much time. But there's more people like you around. There's more books. There's more Facebook things. You can type sober into Instagram and loads of things come up. You can contact those people. There was none of that around. I didn't really know where to go. So I was very fortunate in that sense. And once again, just because I was so frightened and I'd reached the end, I was very honest with her. I think she was like, how much are you drinking? And I told her, she was like, how do you feel when you drink? And I told her, absolutely no bullshit. I was like, I'll do 16, 17 cans a day. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 9 stone. I mean, where was that going?
No wonder you knew every toilet in Bristol.
Yeah, unbelievable. Well, I mean, you know where it's going, don't you? I mean, it's quashing your soul. That's what it's going, isn't it? It's going into your soul. It's going into your peace of mind. It's going into what makes you human.
Yeah.
And then again, once I had a meeting with her, very, very quickly, I was given a rehab date, and I was given options. There was a residential one in Coventry, or I could do a day drop in Bristol. I mean, now you'll pay for rehab, and I did NHS. There's no NHS rehabs, none. They're all gone. Very different world. So I went to the day one in Bristol, but also then when I went to rehab, I saw very quickly that not everybody wanted to be there. Do you know what I mean? Some people were there because of the courts. Some people were there with tags on their ankles.
I think, from my experience, you can tell the people that want to be there because they've reached that rock bottom where I think I remember in AA, it's like the pain of having another drink is more painful than the effort of getting sober. That's sort of where you get to, and you're like, you know what, I'm willing to do anything because my life beforehand was so terrible that I don't actually ever want to go back to it.
Yeah, same here. And I'm aware these days that we don't need that as a society. I think that's great. And there is things, sober curious, which I get. There's grey area drinking, which I sit on the fence about, and a few other bits and bobs. I've got an opinion on grey area drinking. I'm not going to knock it, but I think that what I see these days is that you don't need to go all the way to rock bottom these days. And actually the word alcoholic is actually quite dangerous. There's the guy from Made in Chelsea, forgotten his name, but he's big in the sober space thing, and he talks about the damage that the word alcoholic does. And he's like, maybe you're not an alcoholic, but you've got a drinking problem. But if you carry on drinking, you are going to be an alcoholic. Why don't you stop when you've got a drinking problem? And this just came up on my TikTok, and I was like, God, I hope a lot of people see that, you know, and I'm sure they have, because I think that's where we are now. As you go back to when I stopped drinking, you literally, there was blokes that didn't stop till they'd gone to jail, lost their children, and looking at
Yeah.
going back to jail again. They're like, maybe I've got a problem. And like now, it's like your wife saying to you, per se, Sean, I think you've got a bit of an issue with the piss, mate. And it's like, yeah, maybe I have, because it's more spoken about now. It's like, do you know what? There's nothing wrong with saying my drinking's got a wee bit out of control, and I'd like to measure it, or I'd like to stop it. Whereas back when I stopped, yeah, enjoy your alcoholism. See you when you come back, if you
Yeah.
do.
And that's, to be honest, that's part of the reason I didn't put the word alcoholic in any of the books, because I don't think putting labels to things. And I was the same growing up, drinking from from the early 2000s onwards. Alcoholism was very frowned upon. I
Mm,
mean, really frowned upon. It was never spoken about. It was
mm,
accepted. So then, once you take a word away and just say, talk about drinking, is it problematic for you, regardless of what anyone else thinks, then it's a lot more powerful to a lot more people.
mm,
Then obviously you get these other things like grey area drinking, mindful drinking, um, which are fine if they're helping that subset of people. But ultimately, if like me and you've got a really bad problem where you've ended up in rehab,
mm.
then that is your cue that sobriety is the solution.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I, I identify as an alcoholic. I'm not telling you you're one. I'm not. That's not how I speak about drinking. But that's the word that I tell myself that I am, because that's been my experience, and I got sober off the back end of admitting that that's what I was. And the NHS and various rehabs, they handled me like I'm an alcoholic. They treated me like I'm an alcoholic, and then I was able to get better and put together 18 years of sobriety. So I'm going to stick to it. You know,
Yeah.
I really am. You know, I think the thing is, whether you talk about grey area drinking, mindful drinking, sober curious, whatever, it comes down to, like it does with all addictions, what's the quality of your relationships? I don't care if you're smashing work and pulling in six figures a week. You know, what's your relationship like with your ex? What's your relationship like with your children? What's your relationship like with your family? What are your relationships like? I bet they're smashed to pieces. You know, because years and years ago, I used to help. Used to work for a charity. Used to write CVs for guys that were coming out of prison to help them get back into work. It was a really humbling job, and I was chatting with this guy once. I hadn't volunteered my background to him, but he was talking about addiction. He was clean. He said the thing with addiction is this: every day you turn up, and knowingly or unknowingly, you present the world with the worst version of yourself. And I was literally like that. Freaking saving that little gem for a positive Instagram motivational post.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right. And that's been my experience. I don't want to be a liar or a thief or a cheat. I really don't. But you tip booze down my neck. That's who I become, knowingly or unknowingly. I will justify taking your girlfriend. I'll justify taking money. I'll I'll justify anything, provided it's what I want.
And that's the whole character defects things that I learned about in AA. And let's talk about AA, because when you talk about character defects, that's why I've then moved the conversation into there, because I presume, and I should never presume, but is that where you started to understand those elements of your characteristics under alcohol?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was sober for 16 months. I got very, very fit. I went back to the things I knew. I went back to work. I went back to money. I went back to girls. Because if I'm honest, those things to a certain point in my life had always been good for me. And I think as a society, a lot of people are just, that's the route to go down, isn't it? But after 16 months, I was just suicidal, Sean, which was both scary and a little bit unknown. I couldn't really get my head around it. I'd never been suicidal, and it was becoming stronger and stronger. I was really, really weighing it up. So eventually, I went to AA because there was just no stones left to it. I'd done it. I'd done everything. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to listen. Um, one of the things you can't really knock AA for is it's incredibly welcoming if you're new, um,
And accessible. So
and
anyone listening, AA is, if anywhere, is next door pretty much everywhere in the UK.
yeah, it's really not hard to find a meeting. It's absolutely, especially if you're in a major city. I mean, it's nuts where they are. And so I went along. And I'm not going to lie, I knew I'd found something quite good. I'm a bit of a talker by nature. I don't think I talked for the first 2 months. I was terrified. Um, but it was really good to hear things. And I did, like they say, the suggested things. I went to the same meeting every Sunday. I joined it. I struggled a little bit with finding a sponsor at first because I was obviously, having had a bad experience through church, I was very wary of, I suppose, ultimately men appearing to be sheep when actually they were wolves.
Yeah.
I was very, very aware of that. And then, funnily enough, I sort of pinpointed down to three guys. I thought I'll ask them, and one of the guys, he volunteered at a meeting that he'd been abused by his cousin. And I thought, okay, the likelihood of you freaking fiddling with me is pretty rare. And I got working with the steps, and it did the job, and I realized that, because I think a lot of people have it, don't you, is that I couldn't really understand things that had happened in the 90s. It's like 2007 by this point, and I'm as attached to it as I was then. All I've got is I've just got a different story. I've got all these things in my head that happened back then. And AA is quite good on an amateur psychology level of like framing that down.
I mean, yeah, I think from my experience is that if your thought patterns and your whole life is addicted to drink and drugs, go to AA, because essentially it's really good. Like I'm not knocking it by saying brainwashing, but they're brainwashing you to be sober, and that's ultimately to change neural pathways and to get new habits, etc. Is exactly what some of us need. I definitely needed it. By the sounds of it, you needed it, and it is very good at altering your mindset and your life to sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got some great stuff from it when I did my step 4, my step 5, which is where a lot of people crap themselves, because you've got to really get honest and look at it. I mean, I really couldn't believe what a simplistic, one-dimensional character I was. Like, I was like, wow, that's literally, yeah. I thought I was X, Y, and Z, and it's just like, yeah, I'm a liar and a thief who cooks for a living. There's not really much else going on. But like you say, it gives you that different mindset. So I remember the first time that I said sorry to somebody, not for something I'd done, not something historically. I think something happened at work, and I apologized to this guy, and I got an outcome that I'd never had in my life, Sean. Because you know what? An apology just kills shit dead. Like, if you're at fault and you know you are, and it's evident that you're at fault, and you go, do you know what, Sean? I'm sorry I said that. It literally,
You know what? That's one of the most humbling experiences I had as well. But when you do the step work and you genuinely have to say sorry to someone, when I think there were similarities in my character to you. I was bullied as a kid, so I was very much a bullying type of person because I never wanted to get bullied. So there was always a cold front with me. So then I'm going back to people that I've been horrible to and just genuinely said, look, I fucked up. I'm really sorry. And then you get the goosebumps and you're like, shit, actually feels quite nice to genuinely be sorry for something.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, I think I made an amends about 2.5 years ago to a guy that I'd worked with that I'd been horrendous to him. And he was like, no, we were mates, but I knew differently, and I told him. And I could see how uncomfortable he was initially when he saw me coming over. So, do you know what I mean? I knew, big guy as well, but I was just such a bulldog, there with his wife, I think, and I think maybe his wife's mother. And I just put the cards on the table. I said, look, I treated you like shit. I know I did. I'm really, really sorry for that. And he accepted it like a gentleman, and if I'm honest with you, Sean, that was the problem. Even going back to like our early mid-20s, he was he was the better man. That was the problem. He was a better person than me, and I knew it. And rather than going, oh, let's model myself on this guy, let's learn something from this buck. I mean, he got on with just about everybody. One of those types. Do you know what I mean? And my mentality was, fuck that. you know, yeah. but yeah, it does. It frees you up. It frees you up.
Yeah, so AA is brilliant. It's worked for me. It sounds like it worked for you, and you're right. Those things, those sayings, stay. A lot of the books that I've written have sayings from AA, because they are powerful. And at the time, I always remember sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. Summed up exactly how my life felt every morning, waking up to the same old shit.
Yeah.
And from that day forth, I went to my first Cocaine Anonymous meeting. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings as well, and Narcotics Anonymous meetings. And looking at the similarities and not the differences is something that I not only did in the meetings, because I'll be honest, I went with gritted teeth for a year. I didn't want to be there. I didn't like a sponsor telling me suggestions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when you're in Cocaine Anonymous, and most of the people have been in prison, they're not suggestions. You're going to fucking do it.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I'd imagine you meet some pretty intimidating dudes. I mean, some pretty intimidating dudes in AA. But yeah. The suggested things, yeah, fucking do it. Yeah.
So yeah, then bring up from to current day, because I know that you've been doing work this year, and it's just a highlight to people. Like, you're 18 years sober, and you're still going into therapy or coaching. Just explain what you've been going through this year.
Yeah, well, you have to keep evolving. I think it's one of my things I always say. You know, I think getting fit and nutrition will probably get you through the first 2 years. You know, I think you have to. What gets you through the first 2 years won't get you through the next 4 or 5 years, and so on and so on. You don't. I don't think you need to be constantly evolving. I think it's probably a bit exhausting, and you're probably peeling away things or poking at things that don't need to be looked at. But you do need to. You know, you're a fool if you think that your behaviors that got you through your 30s are going to get you through your 40s. Your values and your beliefs from your 30s are still going to be relevant in your 50s. They're probably not. You know, some of them will, but not massively. I think it's the same with medium or long-term sobriety. You know, I've twice had to take a good look at myself. I think I was about 5 or 6 years sober, and I had to make some big changes. And then till about 2015, and then those changes that I did, they got me to 2015, really. When I had to look at the fact that my anger just wasn't really shifting, you know, not really. You know, I'd got it to a point. I wasn't like losing my shit on a daily level, but I was still angry. That was my base setting, you know, angry. And I use anger as motivation, as a fuel to propel me forward. Bloody unhealthy. You know,
Did you get away with it being a chef?
Yeah, I did. It's not a bad environment. I mean, it's not all Gordon Ramsay. Actually, you can't behave like that in kitchens anymore. And you haven't been able to since the early noughties. He just does it because how he's built. I don't agree with it, but yeah, it's not a bad. It's not a, you know. Yeah, anger is energy, Sean. We know that, you know. But if it's a base setting, eventually it becomes toxic. So in 2015, you know, I had to look at that. You know, I went to an anger management course up in Birmingham at the Custard Factory. I got a lot from that. Unsurprisingly, that was tied into a lot of stuff from my youth, but also as well, it was just pattern behavior. You know, most of it was just pattern behavior. It was like, next time this crops up, why don't you respond differently and see what happens? Like I was saying earlier about apologizing. You know, rather than getting in a ding dong with somebody because of your fucked up pride, why don't you just say, yeah, that was me, sorry. And so I started to respond differently when I felt angry. And of course, that opened up new doors. Things changed, things behaved differently. I started, and it was like, oh, Rich, you know what, that actually works. Stop being so bloody angry about things. And then mostly I've just been involved in the online recovery since COVID. The last sort of 3 years of AA, I really tired of it. It can eat up an enormous amount of your time. I had a young family, and it just, yeah, I just wasn't getting anything from it anymore. And I was really struggling with lots of things that were going on within AA. But I'd be dead without AA, and I'd always say that. And I do suggest it as a recovery platform for people to go and visit. I think you need to go and see it. I don't knock it, but I also left, and never felt like going back. So I had to evolve, and COVID was a disaster in a way because we're still feeling it. We're still feeling it now, aren't we? But it did bring around a lot of online recovery, which I started to tap into, and that was beneficial. I really enjoy it. The podcast and all the things that come through, and keeping sobriety fresh within yourself and changing up your patterns and your routines. But at the tail end of last year, I'd lost a friend of mine to he took his own life, and that really knocked me. And I was working for quite a corporate firm at the time. It was just relentless, and I'd had 6 weeks off with pneumonia, and I just could not get back into the business. So I took a job just down the road from here that I thought I could just kick the can down the line for a bit, and actually you just can't do that. So I crap job, crap money. I felt crap within myself. So I thought, I'm gonna take a look at some sober coaching. So there's a lot of them out there, and if I'm honest with you, I think you have to be really careful who you pick. I always say, watch them for a bit before you hand over your money. I think that there is undoubtedly, when you're quite new to sobriety, there's a freshness to your voice. There's no denying that. I can't even remember what alcohol tasted like. I can't even remember what being pissed felt like. And I think a lot of people who are new, they want to hear that. I see a lot of sober coaches, they're still talking about drinking, and I'm just like, really? But then again, when you've been 18 years sober, I don't want to talk about drinking. I want to talk about the psychology. I want to talk about mindset. I want to talk about it in real depth. And a lot of people, through no fault of their own, they're just not ready to hear that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, mate, you don't got any interest in drinking stories. And it's like, yeah, but
I mean, look, 2 years of being, well, some have even turned into sober coaches after a year. When there's no accreditation behind sober coaching, there's no governing body behind sober coaching. That to me is dangerous. But like you said, if you do your background work and you find someone that you connect with, and they do have a level of depth in their own personal story, they've been to counselling, they've had EMDR treatment for traumas and stuff, then yes, they can transfer those skills well, sometimes better than qualified counsellors can. So yeah, good point. Just be mindful of who you go.
Yeah, of who you choose. Yeah. So I watched my guy for a while, and I messaged him, and I worked with him for 6 weeks, I think. He was a mindset coach. It goes to show, doesn't it? I think 2 years previously, I'd have probably scoffed at that a bit, if I'm honest with you. But you've got to be open. You've got to be open. It's about moving forward. And I got some great stuff out of him: journaling, cold showers, breath work, which I've really enjoyed. I always say now I do coldish showers. I don't do. I just could not do it, Sean. I was dreading them, but actually, if you have it colder, it still does the job. Yeah, and that's getting me through. Earlier on this year, I found out that my abuser had died during COVID, which reopened everything up for me. I'd been to I'd done a lot of therapy around that. I'd left no stone unturned. I'd had 12 years of peace. And it's come back. It's come back with a vengeance. And of course, I'm a parent now myself. I'm older in life. My mother's a large part of what they call my trauma chain. She's an older woman now. My mum's an old woman. So I'm having to be up there helping her. We had the care home. I think we've had the care home chat 2 or 3 times. She doesn't want to go in. It's brought up a massive resentment against her again. Like, why am I here caring for you? You didn't fucking care for me. All of these things. And that's deadly. Sure, if I'm living like that, it's deadly, because it means ultimately I'm heading towards a drink, or I'm certainly living with really hardcore feelings, about something that happened. Now officially, the grooming process started 30 years ago. And I've learned, like, I've got to work on it, and I do get asked sometimes online. It's like, I got a message once, came through on my Instagram, and it was like, mate, how the fuck have you put 18 years together? And I took a little look, and the profile was what is it? A private, but lots of followers and lots of posts with a genuine dude. And I was like, how long have you been sober? I've been sober for 4 months. I was like, well, what have you been doing? And essentially, been doing one thing at a time. Do you know what I mean? And I said, well, that's what I've been doing for 18 years. I'm not going to lie. There's been periods of clinging on.
Yeah.
But I also know as well because I learned this at the first port of call. You deal with the problem as quickly as you can, authentically you can, and ideally with some form of support. Ideally, me left on my own, working through my problems on my own, ain't great. At best, I'm like that. Right, let's go out there and we'll just try and make as much money as possible. Or at worst, I'm like, yeah, do you know what? A couple of cheeky pints, get in my car, drive to work. So that's how I've been able to put together 18 years is by, it's like the trauma's come back up again. I could really do without it. It's really painful. What are my options? I want to deal with it, and I'm going to deal with it. Do you know what? Do you know why, Sean? Because the wife and I were going to go to Italy for my 20th. We've always wanted to go to Naples, and we're going to go to Naples for my 20th birthday. And I want to go to Naples for my 20th birthday, not my second birthday, not my first birthday. I want to go to Naples for my 20th birthday. So I've got to deal with my trauma.
And it's admirable as well, because I think even in AA, like, you could sit there and there'd be someone with 10 years sobriety and they come in after a month or a year out and it's all hell's broke loose, and it's complacency. I think you get complacent to this, like, drinking drugs is an obsession of the mind, and for me it's still there. I still walk down the street, I see someone in tracksuit bottoms and I assume they're a drug dealer and they've got drugs on them. That's just how I think. It's fucking mind-boggling to any normal person that I still have that, but I've been sober for 6 years. It's the same if you're 18 years sober. You still have that obsessive nature, and doing the work, speaking to a therapist, to a sober coach with experience, and going to AA, going to Smart Recovery are all brilliant ways of making sure that you don't get complacent. And yeah, it's been brilliant having you on. We cut short now just because we're run out of time.
My fault. School run, sorry.
No, it's fine. And we'll do a follow-up podcast at some point. But essentially, you've been an ambassador for the Sober on a Drunk Planet Facebook group. Your experience has been brilliant for me on a personal note, and sharing it in the group as well. So I just want to say a big thank you for that. And yeah, I think the group and anyone else who sees this, if you are struggling, then you've got the Facebook group that you can come and join. It's pretty laid back as a group, isn't it? We're not. We've got a no life coach policy, so no life coach is trying to upsell anything. At worst, I might upsell you a book, but that's about it.
Yeah, but they're your books, and it's your group. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, can I just come in and say one thing? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I always say this: cold turkey is one of the worst things you can do. Some people have stopped cold turkey and it's worked for them, but actually cold turkey is the second biggest killer after carrying on drinking. And go and get a medical detox. I always comment on cold turkey posts whenever I see them, and to be fair, I'm often far from the only person saying this is insanity, go and see a doctor, because stopping cold turkey is lethal, because also as well, if you go back to drinking or taking drugs again after you've gone cold turkey, it's like throwing electricity through your body. It just kills so many people. So yeah, don't stop cold. Get medical support. Or get medical advice. You might not need it, but at least you've been.
Yeah, always speak to your GP, and I've always got warnings in the book about if you're suffering with shaking, sweating, hallucinating, all the other symptoms that I think are on the Drink Aware website as well. Then yeah, make sure you get proper advice from your GP. If it's really serious, just go straight to A&E. Thank you very much, Oliver.
No,
love all the wisdom. Love hearing about your story. And yeah, thanks very much for being a great ambassador for the group. And I'm sure this podcast will help people as well.
I hope so. All right, marvelous. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Oliver.